Welcome to CTO Think, a podcast about leadership, product development, and tech decisions between two recovering chief technology officers. Here are your hosts, Don Vandemark and Randy Burgess.
Hey, Randy, what's going on this week?
Let's see. Been working a lot with front-end development, and it seems like I always talk about, oh, wow, I made a breakthrough in testing on the front end, but I did make a breakthrough on the front-end testing again, this time getting front-end tests with Cypress to go push through a CodeShip continuous integration thing, which has been just a pain in the butt because of a few bugs on CodeShip side and the fact that I didn't really have experienced front-end people with integration testing to lean on. And I got it working. Took some extra time to do it, but I feel like when my team goes forward to build some new front-end things, we'll have some great examples to follow. And so it felt productive in that way. But that's pretty much what I've been doing the last week. What about you?
Not a ton. That's true and that's not true. Not a ton in the technology space, but we just got through having a Hurricane Dorian come by, which generated a lot of work for construction specialties, boarding up and tearing down. And it actually might lead to an interesting discussion at a future time. Hurricanes are funny things. They're almost never the same thing. And because of their unpredictable, they're not unpredictable in that they just show up all of a sudden, but they're unpredictable in that you can have that can change. So we had to deal with the changing direction of Dorian over a holiday weekend at that. So it kind of made for some interesting organizational challenges, but we got everybody covered. So it worked out in the end, and it ended up brushing anyway. So a lot of the board up we did probably didn't need to be done. But the stores feel better when it gets done. So,
oh yeah.
Other than that, we're a couple of weeks into college football season, and which is something you and I both enjoy, and we were chatting briefly about one specific topic, and we figured we'd try and tie it together here with leadership in general. So currently, as we sit, 2 weeks of college football played in 2019. We've got UCLA and Tennessee both sitting with 2 losses, no wins. And Florida State sitting with a win and a loss, but the win was in double overtime, and they only won because of a missed extra point to a far inferior team as far as the talent goes that they can bring in. And this is not new for any of those 3 teams. This is something that's been going on since last year, to varying degrees.
Yeah.
All 3 of those schools are traditional powerhouses, you could say. 2 of them have won national championships. I don't know that UCLA ever did, but UCLA is seen as one of the powers in the Pac-12 usually. So I sent you a text.
Well, no. You sent me a text, and it was talking about you weren't sure which dumpster fire of Tennessee, or who was the other one?
Florida State.
Florida State, yeah. But, okay, so let's kick out we're not going to talk about specific sports ball, football stuff. Because I think that the issue around all of these has very little to do with the mechanics of football. If you look at all 3 situations, leadership, the failure of leadership for various reasons is what's happening. And so we can try to take these examples that we're going to discuss for these 3 schools and talk about how that would affect a technology team.
Yeah. So excellent to go ahead and make sure that we don't lose listeners who think we're going to talk football the whole time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what I think is the easiest one. And that's UCLA. So there, what they've done there is they had a number of coaches come through, each of them fairly mediocre with mediocre results. And you had somebody come in who was known as a very successful coach at a decade ago. And what it feels like is he went in and said, we're going to do things my way. I don't care who's here. We're going to do things my way, and we'll eventually turn this around. And here we are, a little ways into that, and there are no signs of anything turning around and potentially getting worse because he's not working with the pieces he's got. And this is, we've talked about this in the past where, as a leader, if you go in and you say, okay, starting today, we're going to build everything in React and Node. And what you have are a bunch of Java developers and a bunch of C# developers. You're not using the strengths you have. Is that the way you see that one?
I guess I even go more drastic with my feelings on that. Brian Kelly was a dominant force of a coach at Oregon.
Chip Kelly.
And he cheated. I don't know how much that cheating meant for everything that they did, but he got busted for cheating, or the school did, because he took off for the pros.
Right.
He went to Philadelphia. He had a reputation as an egomaniac there. He lasted 2 seasons.
I think it was longer. I'll look. But
then he went and took a gig at San Francisco, and they fired him after 1 year, I think. And now he's at UCLA. And so I would tag this to, like you said, one, it's his way or the highway. He's always looked at his past success as why his way and his system is what each place should adapt to. Not that he needs to adapt to the scenario that he was given. Even though I don't think Oregon from day one was his system. He built that over time. He seems to think that he can just do that overnight. There's nothing overnight when you take over a program, any type of scenario that needs to be rebuilt and changed. So if your opinion is, I have a really good approach to building products and software, and you walk in and you don't have the ability to build a team from scratch, you need to look at the team as it exists, what they're used to, what tools they know how to use, and look at how much runway you have to how much change can this group withstand and absorb. And it seems like each step he's made, he's making bad choices. And my assumption is that you can't talk to him. You can't, and this is totally an assumption, but the people I've met in technology like him are the people that you give up trying to talk to, trying to change their mind, trying to say, like, they walk in the door, it is their way, the highway, and it doesn't really matter what your experience is. And I think I did see this happen once with someone when I left a CTO role, and I helped the company I left with onboarding the new person. I tried to give as many tips as I could to that person related to the politics of the organization. More of like, this is how you need to talk to this person. this is what this person is saying, but this is what they really tend to expect, that kind of stuff. And he just ignored it all. He just said, no, I really don't care about that kind of stuff. I'll just deal with it myself. I'm like, oh, okay. And he was out in 4 months, if not less, probably 3 months. And politics was a part of it. He couldn't talk to anybody. And it was just, there's other factors involved. But that's what I see at the UCLA scenario.
So let me throw the next scenario at you, because I don't want to bias your input on it, because I think we see this one slightly differently. Mm-hmm. And that's the scenario at Florida State. So what's your feeling on the scenario at Florida State?
So Florida State was a powerhouse program over the last 2 decades, I would say. Sure. My opinion is that the boosters there, this is going up higher up the ladder. They have a culture at FSU where if you're a wealthy fan and you give them a lot of money, they have started to like kind of let the boosters run things and interfere with the coaches. And so Jimbo Fisher was a guy there the last, I don't know, 7 years. Yeah, and I feel like the boosters or the athletic director basically he got tired of them. And so this is where, if I were to map this to a scenario in tech as a CTO, this is where the CEO is allowing the marketing chief, maybe an investor, maybe a client, like a really important client, to interfere in the product development process.
Right.
And so when Fisher left the way he did to go to Texas A&M, I always looked at it based on what I read. Of course, I'm reading sports rumor crap, so it may not be right. But I got the idea that Fisher did not like the prying hands of the boosters into his program. But what then happened is they went and hired a guy named Willie Taggart, who inherited the mess that Fisher left behind. And he's probably got pressure on unreal pressure from him on those same boosters who weren't kept in check. That's what I'm thinking, but I don't know Willie Taggart that well about his actual ability.
So I liked your comparison. I think it's very much a case where you've got a company run by multiple people, or heavily influenced by multiple people, and not all of them knowledgeable, not all of them right. And what you brought in as a leader is you brought in a younger, less experienced, high energy person without a lot of gravitas. So I think for that problem of, hey, we've got input from a variety of places, and we're going to need to bring someone in who can get everybody pulling in the same direction. Usually if you're talking about powerful, rich people, the way to do that is not to go in and be rah-rah and cheery and trying to be positive about it. You almost have to come in, lay the law down. This as far as managing up. I'm not talking about the managing down. You kind of have to lay the law down and say, hey, this is how this is going to run, and we're going to go forward with it. And it just didn't feel like that happened there. They brought in somebody who doesn't have a great record of success at a major organization. They brought in somebody who's had success in spurts. And it just feels like they needed somebody with a little bit more gravitas. And that's not easy to find usually. But I think when we get to Tennessee, we could almost argue that if the person hired at Tennessee had been hired at Florida State, it might have worked better. But we can get into that as well. But I agree. I think the UCLA was a my way or the highway situation. I think Florida State was a too much influence from outside forces and not the right person to pull it all together situation. And I think as we get to the third one at Tennessee was a power in the 90s, early 2000s. But they've struggled ever since. They've gone through quite a number of head coaches. And all of them have had midland success. Nobody's ever really been able to bring the team back to where it was, challenging for titles. They just had mediocre success the whole time. And what I feel there is I feel you've got a couple things going on there. You've got a sick team right now, a sick organization, an organization that doesn't believe in itself. That at the first sign of adversity is starting to crumble a bit. This is where the hire may have been the right one and they may be okay long-term, but it's just going to take a lot longer than anybody thought. And this is where I was saying the hire at Tennessee might have worked at Florida State as well, because what they did is they didn't go out and get somebody who had a lot of success at a big organization. They went out and got somebody. Well, let me rephrase that. They didn't go get somebody who was the leader at a organization that had a lot of success. They went and got somebody who was a lieutenant at an organization that had a lot of success. And that's one way to address a culture problem, a problem of there's no belief here. You go bring in somebody you can believe in and let him and this kind of goes opposite to what we were talking about UCLA. This is almost a case where you have to come in and say, we're doing it my way, and make the pieces fit what you want to do, because you're not trying to fix it today. You're trying to fix it in the future, because it's been going downhill for so long. So how does that comparison work as far as the way you read that situation?
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee was the dominant program when I was in college. Peyton Manning was the coach-like player who was awesome, and then who was the quarterback right after him that took them all the way? T. Martin. They had, and Phil Fulmer was a program coach. He helped Tennessee go from what was a mediocre program. They weren't the worst in the conference, but they were also competitive, and he took them to the next level. And so when you talk about a sick organization, I guess my opinion there, it's like a company where the investors in the company have an unreal expectation for what the reality should be for corporate growth and profitability.
Sure.
And so while we were mentioning boosters and stuff at FSU, the investors, the various influences, I think Tennessee is like a company that has hired poor leadership, has done mediocre recruiting and hiring, and has an expectation that despite doing the other two poorly, that the product should still be just like it was a decade ago.
Yeah.
And anyone that walks into that job right now, no one recognizes the mess that person is assuming. Now, my opinion on Jeremy Pruitt has changed. He's a new coach now at Tennessee. Because I've seen him operate at Georgia. We saw what he did at Alabama. And what I can, I guess, where I would, if you're hiring a CTO or hiring a director of engineering, it's really important to find out, based upon this person's prior success, how much were they in charge of? You talked about being a lieutenant. Because if you're successful at Alabama, it's because you work under an almost dictatorship of a coaching structure that is extremely successful in Nick Saban. And that's like if I were to go and work for a year at, let's say, Twitter. And I feel like if you walk into a system that already works, it doesn't mean that you know how to do it yourself. So I guess I feel like Tennessee has hired a number of people, a couple of people that they didn't exhibit the leadership that a rebuild needed. They hired Derek Dooley, who had a history of a really popular father, but no real winning tradition of his own. I hired Jeremy Pruitt recently, and he had been a well-known coordinator who caused ripples amongst his... He was known as an instigator of divisiveness at Georgia when he was there. I'm not saying it wasn't justified. That program kind of changed after he left, but he was someone that had not proven he could coach a team anywhere, like as a head coach.
Right.
And then the one hire that didn't work out that I was surprised was Brian Kelly. Or no. What was that guy's
Butch
name?
Jones.
Butch
Jones.
I'm horrible with these names. Butch Jones, which is it was really a good coach name. But he had really big success at Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's correct.
And he had every reason to succeed there, but when you saw him interview, you got the sense that, oh, wait, maybe his leadership plays better at a small scale.
Yeah.
So what I feel like Tennessee's biggest issues going forward are going to be, do they really understand how the whole shebang the whole organization needs to change? Because I feel like every factor of Tennessee, like you said before, is sick. There is a negativity there, a expectation level that can't be met for a good amount of time. I just don't see, until at the very top they recognize the state of things, I don't see how they change it. And so if you talk about an organization that perhaps has a product that is maybe old and out of date, it needs constant upgrading and maintenance, and they aren't able to launch new features, at the very top, I think you have to have an agreement as to where things stand and what needs to be worked on first. Because I truly feel that like Tennessee represents, I think UCLA could come back to where they were before if they were to get rid of the egotistical leader, which is not to say they were a dominant program, but they were not a disaster like they look right now. I feel like FSU, with the right coach, could probably get back on top given their recruiting base and the other things. But Tennessee represents to me an organization that hasn't hired talented devs for a long time because they're being cheap or because they just let the competition beat them. And I feel like overall, it's every stakeholder of that company, of that organization, has a very warped idea of what the state of things are.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is probably a bad analogy, but I'm going to make it anyway. To some degree, Tennessee feels a little bit like Windows, Windows 2000 or early 2000s, Microsoft early 2000s,
Yeah.
where the competition has passed them by and they're not willing to see the new world as it is. They had a run of success when there was less competition, when the competition for the recruits for the players was lesser, and when the competition within their field was lesser. But these days, it's Tennessee's not a football hotbed, so it would be like trying to build a software company in, say, like Florida. Okay, it's not. Florida's not a place where you have a lot of developers, so you have to work real hard to find to either do remote hires or to bring people in from out of state. We have some here in Florida, but we don't have a ton of really experienced. We don't have that base, so to speak. And I think Tennessee's kind of the same way in that they've got some talent, but the talent they have go off to other cities, so to speak, other teams. And in the same respect, SEC football today is not SEC football in the early 2000s. There are more teams that are competitive, and there are some teams that are outright dominant. And Tennessee hasn't changed to that. So I think it fits all your points. And it just felt like Microsoft, to a degree, ignoring the whole mobile movement for a while.
So Tennessee is a Steve Ballmer of college football.
That's the way I'd put it.
I mean, if you look at Ballmer's leadership failures, it was hubris, or hubris. Hubris.
Hubris. Yeah.
Like by far, nothing tops the ignoring the mobile phone revolution as it happened right in front of them. And open source, I would say those are the two big things that that Microsoft really stumbled on when the changes came, smacked them in the face. I think Tennessee, as a program, made big failures when, you could say firing Fulmer years ago was a big issue where they felt he could do better than him, and they never did. But I'm not so certain that he would have led them beyond what he got them to.
Yeah, if they hadn't fired him, it would have happened within the next 3 years anyway. Yeah, because he wouldn't have been able to sustain the success.
But the point you just made about the competitive landscape of college football has changed, just like startups have changed the tech scene. You can, because of the influence of venture capital, more and more startups can steal engineers that otherwise would have been working at Microsoft, at IBM, at Google. And so in a way, you've seen a talent spread that has been like no other in corporate America. And in college football, a lot of the Division II programs and is it FCS or
FCS, yeah.
Like those programs have a ton of venture capital in the form of boosters and moving up into a television market and being part of conferences that have more money. And now those schools are not hurting the recruiting of an Alabama. They're hurting the middleman.
Right.
And Tennessee was a middleman program. Georgia could have been, but they've stayed above it. Florida was never going to be a middleman, but Tennessee is one step away from Kentucky, and not from a state standpoint, but from a college program. So my bigger point is, if you are a mid-sized tech company and you're trying to recruit good people, and you're thinking, man, it's harder and harder to find good people at a low price point that I want to pay. The answer is, yeah, that's the way things are going. I can work remotely for companies in Chicago that will pay higher than what a company that I could drive down the street and work for will pay. So now you're saying I get paid more and I don't have to drive to an office every day. I mean, where am I going to go work? I want to work for the remote company out of a big city.
Right.
So the middleman, Kansas City, the tech market here is a mid-grade city in the tech scene, if not lower than that. And they are going to start losing more and more people who are willing, that can find remote work out of a big city. And there's been chatter about it amongst the community here, but I think over the next decade, you're going to see it even more as remote work becomes more prevalent and the big city firms come in with budgets that are beating kind of the middle class of tech cities. I just don't know if the tech cities are going to respond, if the middle class tech cities are going to respond in that way. But right. I feel like that's what's, in a football sense, I feel like that's what's happening to Tennessee is, hey, you're in the middle, now you're getting eaten from below, not beaten from above necessarily.
Well, you're getting beaten from above because you're not changing to the competitive landscape, and then you're getting beaten from below on talent. So they're kind of taking punches in both directions, and I'm not 100% sure that's solvable to get them back to where they were. They can have success in spurts, but I just don't see anything sustained.
Now there could be some cosmetic changes that they could make that may work, and get a new theme song. That Rocky Top stuff sucks. Puke orange. Go for a brighter shade. I mean, I know that's running into Florida Gator territory. Okay, hey, I'm getting off.
We've got a good shade of orange. They need to stay away.
I'm not talking tech anymore. I'm just getting personal because it's Tennessee. But yeah, I mean, I think on all three of these scenarios, I've seen these disasters happen at tech companies. And it's always leadership. It's not from the bottom up. It is always top down. And so when I've looked at CTO jobs, I looked at a bunch. Like one of the reasons I'm not a CTO at the moment is because I would talk to companies that were looking for a CTO, and I would see that the infrastructure was not there for success.
Right.
Like I could walk in and do everything perfectly, but it was underfunded at a drastic degree compared to the goals. It was the expectations, usually because there's someone else was a CTO before that left, and now whoever was left holding the bag, usually the founder, had an expectation that this product was already where it should be. And I would look at it and go, oh, you have no idea how much more you need to do. And in unrealistic expectations about hiring. Like I would talk to people that would literally tell me, I really want to have one of those cool offices, open, like the open office, like kind of layout for developers. I would say, you're expecting me to hire people below the market rate, and I'm going to force them to drive 45 minutes in to your office, your dream office. You're not like, proximity is a big factor for you for a limiting where I can hire. And they're like, yes. And I would ask the question in a way that told them this is a problem you're going to have, and they would still not get it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, I'm not taking that gig.
Yeah, for sure.
And So the lesson, whether you're an assistant coach looking for your first head coaching hire, or you're a director of engineering looking for your first CTO job, is don't chase a title, chase a program, chase an organization that can work with what you can bring.
Yeah, chase a situation.
Because just because someone gives you a title doesn't mean you have any abilities to make changes there that need to happen.
Right.
I think if you were to look at Kirby Smart, who went to Georgia, he walked into a program that was ready to absorb what to support the changes that need to happen and absorb his program, and then he adjusted it to fit what the Georgia culture was, which he knew because he went there. But it's not like Alabama there all the way. There's a lot of differences that he brought, and he admitted, I can't do everything that Saban did because the Georgia infrastructure is different than what Alabama brings. And I feel that anyone moving into leadership positions needs to look at that whole picture, because it's not just about you. That's the Chip Kelly problem. It's not all about you. It's about everybody that's working together when you move into that role.
Right.
And that's what's really important, is to have a good grasp of that.
Agreed. And I think that's a good. I think we've done a decent job of breaking down 3 leadership problems and how to avoid them in tech companies. And by the way, we got to talk a little bit of football, so I think we achieved all our goals today.
Amazing. I hope we still have people that maybe don't care about sports ball, but can still say, "Oh, I understand. They didn't make it too technical."
Yep.
Like we didn't talk about spread offenses and crap like that,
and Bagman at Georgia and things like that.
Now, okay, the show's over.
It's getting personal now.
It's pretty personal.
All right.
The Bagman. Wait, I thought the Bagman's at Auburn.
They were. Kirby hired a few. All right.
I get it.
All right, so we're actually going to be in the same place for 4 days this upcoming weekend. Maybe we'll get an episode or 2 recorded while we're together, and we'll try and keep it as sports free as possible.
Oh yeah. We should have talked about this next week, but oh well, it is what it is.
All right,
man.
Sounds good, and see you in 4 days.
Yep, later.
Thanks for listening to the CTO Think podcast. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at ctothink.com. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. Patreon contributions help us to produce episode transcripts, which allow people that are deaf or hard of hearing to access the show. If you have feedback, ideas, or want to be a guest, please email us at hello@ctothink.com. Show music is Dumpster Dive by Mark Wallach, licensed by premiumbeat.com. Voiceover work by meganvoices.com. You'll hear from us next week.